guys, welcome back. CFP here, and this is Survival Living. Now today's video we're going to be discussing coronal mass ejection, solar storms, solar flares. This is a topic in SHTF scenario preparedness that we go over all the time. This is something that needs to get out there. We're not going to be discussing EMPs in this video, although that is a threat. We want to take a look at what can naturally happen and what the sun is able to dish out, what is done in the past, and what's going to happen in the future here on Earth. This is a topic that has happened. This has happened to Earth. Okay, this has happened to Earth multiple times. Now we're going to take a look at that and also project, is it going to happen again? Stick around.
Over 150 years ago, a giant solar flare heaved a chunk of the sun into our planet. It knocked out the world's first primitive electrical system, the telegraph. Today's experts agree that the next strike is overdue. What will happen if the same size storm from over 150 years ago struck our modern world today? There are very few cultures left on our planet that knows how to function without electricity. The disaster that blows out the world's electrical power and paralyzes civilization begins on the surface of the sun. Roughly 17 hours before impact, scientists that monitor the sun notice a huge, violent explosion called a coronal mass ejection. During a CME, enormous bubbles of superheated gas, called plasma, are ejected from the sun. Over the course of several hours, 1 billion tons of material are lifted off the sun's surface and accelerated to speeds of 1,000,000 miles an hour. This could happen several times a day when the sun is most active. During its quieter periods, CMEs occur once every 5 days. When the plasma cloud hits our planet, a geomagnetic storm follows. The shock wave of charged particles compresses the Earth's day-side magnetic field, while its night side gets stretched out. Like a rubber band, the terrestrial magnetic field eventually snaps back with the same amount of energy as a bolt of lightning. The onslaught of charged particles and the temporary restriction of the Earth's magnetic fields has observable effects. Aurora lights, usually only seen near the poles, can drift to lower latitudes and become more brilliant. The disturbance of the magnetic field can also expose Earth to deadly cosmic rays. The atmosphere still provides protection for everyone on the ground, but astronauts in space may receive lethal doses of radiation. During a solar storm in 1989, cosmonauts aboard the Mir space station received their maximum yearly radiation doses in just a few hours. The real, long-lasting danger comes from the storm's effect on a technology. The flurry of magnetic activity and induced electric currents has the potential to severely disrupt power grids, satellites, communication networks, anything that uses electricity. When the sun aimed a CME at the Earth in 1989, the resulting storm collapsed the Hydro-Quebec power grid. 6 million people were without power for 9 hours. But the 1989 storm is nothing compared to the geomagnetic storm of 1859. Known as the Carrington event, after amateur astronomer Richard Carrington, who observed the flares that triggered the storm, it was the most powerful geomagnetic storm ever recorded. Auroras were observed as far south as Hawaii and the Caribbean. Witnesses at higher latitudes reported being able to read newspaper by the light of the aurora alone. Telegraph networks around the globe catastrophically failed. Operators received shocks and telegraph paper caught on fire. A repeat of the Carrington event in today's far more interconnected world would be devastating. Cascading failures would quickly shut power down to millions of people in a matter of minutes. Communication networks would fail, and GPS satellites upon which the entire air traffic system relies on would shut down. Roughly 17 hours after the CME leaves the sun's surface, it will slam into Earth's magnetosphere, which in turn will knock out the world's electric grid. Everything that runs on electricity will stop running, but not before many electrical systems become overloaded and catch fire. Power transmission lines and substations will catch fire, and many cities will be engulfed in firestorms as a result of a direct hit from another coronal mass ejection. Although the electrical charge from such event is relatively harmless to people, the secondary results will be devastating to millions. Without the advancement of electricity, billions will perish on Earth. Experts project that in America alone, after 1 year without power, 90% of its population will die. That's roughly 288 million people dead, leaving roughly 32 million people after the first year. Out of the population of the planet, over 7 billion, Earth is left with only 700 million people alive. How can so many lives perish over the loss of electricity? For starters, the fires that had started from the initial CME were unstoppable in larger cities. Without power, the water pumps needed to supply pressure for putting out fires just wasn't there. Along with no water for firefighting, municipal services will also stop. Sewage no longer works, which will lead to disease. Clean, drinkable water no longer available. Without water, people only live a few days. Without electricity, life in high temperature areas will need an abundance more drinkable water than when electricity was available. Food is another problem, or we should say the availability of food is the problem. Gone are the days of being able to shop at the corner store or supermarket. After the initial hit of a CME, people will not understand the trouble the world is in. People will treat the power outage as a localized event. Since communication on a global network no longer works, people will only see the smaller picture for the first week. Cash will still be accepted as a form of payment for goods and services the first week of the power outage. Debit and credit cards, however, will not work as soon as the CME hits. Just as normal power outages, cards and digital currency won't work. It's as if your money was never there. Now, we have spoken before about precious metals, gold and silver, and the possibility of it being used as currency during SHTF events. I do believe that during the first to second week of global power failure, gold and silver will be more viable form of currency when paper money is no longer accepted, after people realize the power is no longer coming back. But after the first few weeks, even gold and silver will become worthless, as food and other essential supplies begin to disappear and show no signs of restocking. A barter system will quickly begin to form, What food left will only be traded for what the holders see valuable to themselves. With no food and no form of monetary currency, the unrest and riots will begin. Starvation is a motivator many have never faced. With billions of people facing starvation, they will begin looting normal means of food locations. Supermarkets will be the first hit. People will fight and kill over a single meal when faced with starvation and death. After the markets, looters will proceed to warehouses, food processing facilities, and eventually outlying residential areas. Whether it be a smaller group to large mobs, people will look at their neighbors as a possible food stash. Whether or not humans would ever resort to cannibalism, people will attempt to take what others have without the repercussions of their criminal behavior. Society will not stand without order. Without the available packaged food, people will begin to venture to the woods for food. The American wildlife cannot sustain a hunter-gatherer lifestyle at a massive scale. With millions entering the woods to hunt for food, the wildlife population will quickly vanish. Deer, raccoons, squirrels will be hunted to near extinction. Freshwater fish will also dwindle. Human casualties from hunting accidents, disputes over animal kills, animal attacks, and just getting lost in the woods succumbing to the elements will factor in the loss of lives the first year. And the most troubling and deadly event after power failure will be the meltdown of nuclear power plants. With over 400 nuclear power plants across the globe, the meltdown of these plants will be the largest killer the first year and years to come. Without power to provide gasoline to power emergency generators for these plants, generators will run out of fuel after 3 to 5 days. That's when its battery power kicks in, providing the nuclear power plants an additional 7 days of power before everything shuts down. 10 to 15 days before the running, cool, refrigerated water stops flowing over the spent fuel rods in the facility. Without the cooling pond, these rods quickly heat up and the pools of water begin to steam. Evaporation quickly starts, and then the fires and the steam explosion starts. The immediate areas surrounding the facility will become irradiated, and the radioactive material released from these fires will cause contamination hundreds of miles away. We can clearly see such an event that has happened in the past with Chernobyl. This was a meltdown.
Alright, so once every 100 years. Alright, this is a disaster that happens once every 100 years. Now, we have missed the boat on this one. Alright, we haven't had one in the past 100 years. That tells us that we are overdue massively for a coronal mass ejection to be hitting Earth. Alright, now I want to take time right fast. Now, there was solar flares, solar storms in 2012 and 98, I believe it was. And I've had people comment before, some emails. Well, right there should show you that that means that we're going to reset the time, and it's 100 years from those dates. No, it is 100 years before Earth gets hit by another coronal mass ejection. Not near misses, not, okay, we saw a eruption on the sun, it missed us by, a couple of days in the orbit system, so we reset the clock. That's not how this is. It's every 100 years is when they say the Earth gets hit by this. We have not been hit in a while, okay? So that means we are counting down to when we get hit. It's not if we're going to get hit. We know we're going to get hit. It's when. and we're behind the timetable. So this will happen again. This is an actual threat in our lifetimes and that of our children. All right, so let's just say that we are behind schedule on getting the coronal mass ejection. All right, let's say that I die before this happens. It's still a countdown. All right, it just means I died early and it didn't happen. I have kids. I want my children to be prepared for this. If I'm too old, I die of old age and it hasn't happened, that's fine. Human life expectancy is not 100 years old. Our human life expectancy is lower. Okay, so we should be seeing this in our current life status. In our current life, we should be seeing a coronal mass ejection. But let's say it's just a little bit slower. Let's say it's our children's life that this happened. Are you preparing them? I'm not talking about scaring them. Are you preparing them? Are you teaching them how to filter out water? Are you teaching them how to hunt? Are you stocking up food and supplies for them? This is going to be bad, guys. Everything is going to stop. No power. That means no food, no water, nothing. Everything stops. There is no mode of transportation moving stuff around. There is no way to keep the infrastructure of society going with no power. All right, guys, so this is what scares me the most with a coronal mass ejection, EMPs, is our nuclear power plants. Now, when these things go off, and they will go off because there's just no way to take care of them if there's no power, if everything stops, no way to pump water. Don't be around them. All right, I'm not telling you to move right now. I'm telling you, if the power goes down and you know it's going to be down for a very long time, move from that location. Okay, get away from there. The initial area when these things explode is going to be irradiated. All right, now will radiation go into the upper atmosphere and will it get move? Yes, it will. So try to stay upwind and out of the cross patterns of these wind. You can look at your map. There's wind maps. You can look at the history of how wind acts in your area annually. You can see these things. Find out where these power plants are. See where your location is. If you've got to have a plan to move from the location, get that plan in order. All right, I'm not telling you to pack your bags right now. I'm not telling anybody to do that. Just have a plan to do that if this happens. Make sure you get IOSAT tablets, all right? Those things that we keep. That way, when something like this happens, we have a way to block our thyroids from that particular isotope radiation. That way, if something happens, I mean, we got suits, we got masks, we got all that stuff, but we're preppers. Doesn't mean we're going to stay in that location. No, we have that equipment to safeguard us on our way out of a location. So this really concerns me. We actually take a lot of great steps in preparing for that. Another thing you need to think about is food. All right, animals that are caught in those radioactive locations, they don't just stay there. Animals migrate. Think about that too. Do you have a Geiger counter? All right, so you're hunting, you finally get a deer. Boom, there he is. You drop him, you eat him. You share them with your family, friends. Y'all get radiation sickness and poison from the deer meat that's radioactive. Geiger counters is a good idea. You can actually scan your animal before you eat them. Geiger counters are not cheap. They also have to be recalibrated. I believe it's annually or every 2 years. Yeah, there's a lot to this, guys. But when it comes to safeguarding your life, it's worth it. All right, guys, so that is the video. I can already hear the fear porn now. I'm not trying to do fear porn. I'm trying to get you aware of this situation. I want you to understand that this is coming. This isn't fear porn. This is me telling you, here's the scientific proof on this. They say it has happened before. They've shown that it's happened before. They're saying it's going to happen again within our lifetime or our children's lifetime. This isn't something projected 100,000 years from now, multiple generations later. This is now. get prepared. All right. Now, I respect and love everybody here. I don't mean to upset people. I'm not trying to be, fear pornish and scare people. This is a serious threat. People need to take very serious. You need to prepare for it. Is a coronal mass ejection something that you can survive? Absolutely. Get to prepping. Get your skills up. Build your community around you. That way when things go down, you're not left on your own, and you're not left facing the threats coming at you. Because let's face it, when people are starving, they will do anything for food. And if that means taking your stuff by force, they will. Alright guys, y'all take care. Speak to y'all later.